Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bootcamp 2020. Today's session will be working with forms. Today, Zeeshan will be leading the class today. We'll be doing the introduction to the forms, and then in the next class, Daniyal will continue, and then I will follow up at the end with Project 10. So let's get started, Zeeshan.
Okay, so working with the form seems like when we generally think about that, why do we need a special time for the forms or a special library for manipulating or managing form? So it is important to understand that managing forms is not as easy as normally students or people or professionals thinks, because when you are developing a form or working on a input elements, so what you need to do is you need to manage your input box, and once user input any value into that, you need to validate if it's a correct input. You need to show errors, and once user correct that errors, you need to hide those errors, and then you need to collect all those information and then send that information to the server. So if you try to do all these steps, validation, form building, and uh, displaying errors, all these things need to be done. If you try to do this manually by using default fields, features, or input elements available, then it will be difficult, and it require a lot more code than you can do with the some library or some other things. And you can do much better validation if you are doing and using any other library. So that's why we need to have a special focus on forms, because most of the some applications require good implementation of forms. If you have a 10, 20, or 30 fields in your application, mostly financial applications also requires registration application where user fills registration, so it has lot of fields and all of them need some validation. So that's why we need to special focus on the forms. So what we are going to do is, first show you how we develop a form with React without using Formik and Yep. So you will see the problems and the code, how much we need to implement that, and then we'll transform that code into what you say in Formik. So let me share my screen first, and then we can. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so at this moment, I have initially I have created a project, and in that project, I have installed Formik, Yup, and Material UI. I'll explain them later, but at this moment, they are installed. But initially, we don't need to see anything from there, and we just try to implement the form if we want to implement a form in our application. So let me just do like this here, and terminal, and yarn start. App.js, what I'll do is I will remove. Okay, so and what I'll do here is I'll implement a form, a control or a component, user form .js. And in this, what I'll do is I'll start creating a form. Now I need, let's say I'll be asking user his name, age, and email address. So I'll need 3 input fields. What I'll do is label HTML4 input type equals to text, and just a moment. Okay, so another input field which will be the age, and for that what I'll do is I'll put in type, it should be number, and should be age, name. What I'll do is I'll give it a name input field as ID, name, ID. Are you online, right?
ऐड कर लो, स्टार्ट कर दो.
Yes, we are working.
We are live.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Okay.
So
Sorry.
age, and then another input field. Let's skip this one. We have enough. We are enough with the 2 fields there. So we have this form at this moment. Let me add this in app.js and we'll see how it will appear. So we have user form, name, and age property, and once I submit that form or I press the submit button, it should submit all the values to server. So at this moment we will not be sending to the server, but we must call a function which will collect all these information and then submit to the server. So what I'll do is in user form, I need to collect information from this input field and this second input field. So the normal, if you are working with normal forms in React, what you need to do is you need to use the useRef function. So const name equals to useRef, and then what I'll need to do is ref equals curly bracket, and I'll pass the name here. Ref equals age. What it will do is whatever information will pass or type in this text field that will be available in this property. I'll show you how you can access that information, and whatever you will update in that property will be updated in the text field. Once we are done with this, what we need to do is I forgot to wrap it in around form. So let me create a form. And on the form, I'll do on submit. And either I can create a function over here or I can create a function over here. That's our choice, how we need to handle it. and we will receive event in this input. Okay, so let me first show that once we click the button, it will show us some changes. And here I'll pass this handle submit. Use ref. Now we have these fields. I'll add some values, but at this moment these values will not do anything. Submit. And what's happening is it's submitting the page to the server, so whole page gets refreshed. We don't need that, so we need to stop that. That's another thing which we can skip if we will be using once we'll go for the forming. Prevent default, we need to call prevent default function so that it should not submit the page to anywhere, because we will be sending information in the background. It's still p default. Okay, so here we go. As I click the submit button, it display hello submit. So that means once we fill all these fields, we'll press the submit button and it will call this function. In this function, that's our world. Now we need to pick all the values and submit or pass to any server. So here how I can access the value whatever input in this name field. So what I'll do is let me show console.log name.current.value. Name.current is in DOM element. So we are using input text box. So we will have a DOM element, input element we have in name.current, and then we can access all those DOM properties, value and type. All these things will be available to us in this function. Page. Okay, so now whatever I'll type over here, submit. As you can see, we have access to these information, and that's how we are doing it in normally. So we created the form, we use the input button, input text fields, we created the input text field for the number, and then we implemented the submit button. So that's how we implement the submit button. Now the problem is, if I need any validation, if I press the button, what it will do is it will submit the data to the server with empty information. We don't need to do, because we'll be writing fetch here so that we can submit data to the server, or we'll be using Redux to handle create async thing, and we'll be sending data in to the server through Redux. But whatever we will be doing, we'll be doing using this handle submit button. So what we need to do is we need to check that if these values are valid or not. So in that case, I need to handle that myself. If name.current.value, if it does not exist, then show some error. How do I can show the error? So what I need to do is I need to implement div. All these things will help us in our implementation of Formik. So it's important to understand this. Here we need to display error somehow. So what we are going to do is we will use const name error, because we also have an age property, so we need this for both of them. State age error and page. So now what I'll do is set name error, and I'll say name field is required. That's the one implementation. What I need to do is name field should be required, and it should not be more than 50 characters. It should not be less than 2 characters. So all these information needs to be handled manually. Name dot current dot value dot length greater than 20. So if it's greater than 20, then it will show the error that name field must be less than 20 character. And here what we'll do is we'll not send the request because we have the errors. Okay. What this name error will do, it will display set name error. Now, if I'll submit the form without name field is required, what I can do is let me just mark it red so that we can see it clearly. Okay, name field is required. Same thing we can do with the age. Okay, let me add too many characters. Name field is required. Okay, because the error is not being updated. Why it is not being updated?
I think it was the spelling of length was not right there.
Okay, LENGTH. Thanks. So that's why it was not being updated. So if it's empty, it will show name is not required. If length is too long, what it will do is it will say. But as soon as I remove those fields, error should be erased. I need to handle that separately. So I need to keep constantly checking that field if it's been cleared or error has been resolved. So I need to remove this error as well. That requires additional code. So all in all, what you need to do is you need to implement too much of a code for handling the properties. Then you need to handle those errors. Then once your fields, let's say it's fresh page and I submit, it says error. Now I implement it correctly. And then once I have put all the correct information, this error should be disappear, but it needs to be implemented separately by myself. Otherwise it will not work. And this is only one field. If your form has 10, 20, 30 or 40 fields that needs to be hell of a code that will require to implement in your form, that will be too much to handle easily. So that's why we need something like Formik. Now let's us move to Formik, why we need it and what it does for us. What Formik does is basically it gives you a capability where you can handle these uh, boilerplates or the code that needs to be repetitive or there are too much of code to handle a form. So Formik reduce that all these what you say hassle, and you can implement that very easily. So that's why we need to implement. So in getting started, you can see we have what we need to do is npm install Formik. So all these error handling and information updated, if field has been corrected, so error should get removed. All these things needs to be should will be done by the Formik, so we don't need to be worry about that. So npm install Formik. I have already done this in our code, so I'll be not installing it. I will directly go to the code, what needs to be implemented and how Formik helps us. So if you see what Formik does, getting values out of a state, validation, handling form submission, all these things will be done with Formik. So now you can see Formik hook. We call Formik use Formik, and we provide it a object. That object requires initial value, whatever form fields you have. So initial value, let's say you have email, at this moment we have name and age property, so we'll provide that. And what you need to be done on the submit. Your form is normal form, which we have already implemented. We need to change the on submit, and how we need to provide these on change properties. So what I'll do is copy everything from this code which we have just implemented to the form with form JS. Now I'll remove all these use ref and validation as well for now. And what I'll do is I will call const Formik equals to use Formik. Initial values, it's an object, and at this moment we have two properties, two input fields, name and age. So I'll give it a name, and at this moment it should be empty. Age, it should be 0. That will be initial value, and then I need on submit. So on submit is a property, and it requires a function, and we need to pass values inside it. What these values are, I'll explain in a moment. Now we are done with the Formik hook. We have provided the initial value. We have provided the submit button. What we'll do is we'll remove this on submit from here, and we will provide Formik dot handle submit. Formik dot handle submit. So we have created a function which will handle this. Whenever we need to submit the form, what we need to do in that function, it will be implemented over here, and this on submit will be available as handle submit for our form. So we have provided this. Next, what we need to do is, and now we are not using the ref, so I'll remove this ref, and what I will do is, let me add error for this as well. At this moment we do not have error, so let's skip it. Now here we need to add two more properties. One is on change. Change will provide property from Formik. Formik dot handle change. Why it needs to be implemented? Because whenever property gets updated, a function will be called in the Formik, and it will update whatever state needs to be changed. No, another one is value. Yes, value. So Formik dot values dot name. This name is the one which we have added over here. So we need to implement what you say. We need to use the recommended way how we need to implement it. So if we are naming our property as a name, so we need to keep name property over here so that it will be available over here, and also in error and validation all over the where we will be using this form. So we need to understand that whatever property name we are using, it should be sync everywhere in initial value, in value over here, and in error as well. At this moment, I'll remove this so that it will not give us an error. On change, handle change, value equals to Formik dot values dot page. Okay. And in app, what I'll do is I'll remove this user form and I will add user. I haven't renamed it. The form should be user form with Formik. How? Let me see. Okay, we have was old error. Handle change is not defined. Line number 3. Okay, I need to put format prefix because all these functions are available in this object. The object we have created using the use Formik hook. It returns an object. It has on, change, handle, submit. All these properties available in Formik function. Okay, so now we have two properties, and what I can do is I will add value hello and 23, 34, submit. So everything was the same: input fields, form, label, button, all these things were the same. The difference was I used the use Formik hook, provided the initial value. If I provide initial value with some different values, so it will be display in the form. I'll show you in a moment. Then a submit. Then this submit button, the values are is an object. All those information we have used here, initial values. So it will be coming from this name input field and this age input field. And once I submit the button, this function gets called and it has all this information. And what we can do is we can handle our server request from here. So that's how we implement the Formik, just the initial way. And if I need to handle the error, if I press the button, it just submit the function and it gives me empty value. So I don't need that. So what I need to do is I need to implement errors. So what Formik does is Formik provides us another property, validate. Here, what we can do is we can implement a function, and that's the same function. It has values, and here what we can do is again it will be the same implementation as we have done over here, with just little difference that we need to implement. We need to provide a property errors or whatever we want to name it, and what we can do is we can verify the property if values dot name exists. If there is a value and it has a name, so what we'll do is we will do error dot name equals to name is required. Let me Copy from here. Okay, so instead of name.current, I need to do values.name.length, and instead of this, so what I did is I have implemented the validation on the name field. So and then I need to return errors from here. Once we have done this, it's been implemented and we have the errors. If we submit the button and we did not provide the value into the input field, it tried to display the error. But at this moment, we have not implemented anything related to error. So what we need to do is the same div we have this div, and what we'll do is we'll display the error. Formik dot errors dot name. So if there is an error, it will display over here. The implementation of error div should always be conditional, that if there is an error, then you should display. So for that, what we should do is, in a general, as a general practice, we should check if there is any value in error field, question mark, then we display this div. Uh, Otherwise, return null. So this div will only appear in our DOM if there is an error. Okay, so as you can see, I just submit the button and it checks the validation. If it's not perfect or there's an error, it appears, and as soon as I press the key into the text box, that error disappears. Why? Because once I started to updating the field, error should be disappeared, because user do not want to see it, because I have already done with these implementation or changes. So error should disappear. I didn't have to implement that also. Formik is doing itself into behind, and what we have reduced is the implementation with the uh, use state for the errors. So if there will be 10 fields, there will be 10 use state, and there will be a multiple else if. These else if still exist over here, so we need to reduce that as well. So I'll go to this in a moment. So at this moment, initial value on submit, validate, and it will work just like a charm. And let me refresh it again. If I'll be provide a value, any value, then it will submit and we'll have values. If it will be empty, name field is required, and as I'll type single now, requirement, another error field is, it should be less than 20. So I'm just typing. As it reached the 20 characters, error appears. If I'll keep typing, error will stay. If I'm pressing back button. So as it will reduce to less than 20, error will disappear. So these errors should be is being handled by Formik directly. So we do not need to worry about this as well. Okay, so we are done with that. Now what we need to do is we need to handle the validation in some much better way. As you can see, the example is showing first name, last name, email, they are being implemented it in some difficult way. So what we can do is we can use now here is we have another library named Yup. And what writer of Formik does is, Yup is a separate library. The the one who have wrote the Formik have provided the built-in implementation, so that if you are using Yup, you can use the validation in your form as well. Otherwise, Yup is a schema validation library, and it is not related to only validation of form. Any JavaScript you want to validate, let's say you have submitted the request to the server and server returns a response. So you have an object and it has a multiple properties. Now you need to verify that that particular object has this and this then and this properties or not. If it has a particular property, is it valid value? It has a valid value or not. So you can verify your JavaScript object on the client side or on the server side, however you want to use it. So Yup is schema validation or object validation library, and it is being used with Formik so that you can easily validate your input fields. So you have a separate library for Yup, not Yup, it's Yup, Yup NP. So there are many other things. Ones which we will be using with Formik are not the only thing which we can do with the Yup. It has many other things and a lot of things that can be done with the Yup library. So you can explore that later. So I have already installed Yup also in my project, so I don't need to. Otherwise, you can call yarn add Yup. What Yup does is, what Formik does is Formik has provided a separate property schema validation, especially for Yup. That's why Yup on the creator of Formik said that it has provided this separate implementation inside the Formik. So you have a separate property schema validation for Yup. If you need to validate your form with the Yup, so we have a property name schema validation, and what we'll do is yup.object. It will accept a JSON object, and in that what we'll do is, again, your initial name is first name, your input field should be the first name. So all these needs to be synced up so that they should follow the pattern. Yup.toString. What it will does is it will first verify that this property should be string. Then max, it should not be greater than 15 characters, and required, it should be a required field. So it's quite easy. Instead of implementing if else if, and then you need to remove the error, so you need to handle all those things separately. So instead of doing that, what we let's
we can do it in a declarative style.
yeah, it's a declarative style. Instead of doing if and else, it will be it's a declarative style. So what I'll do is, again, let me create with Formik validation.js, and I'll do I have updated the code, and I'll remove this validation because we are not doing manual validation. We are doing schema validation schema, and it requires Yup. Yup is not available. I need to import static as Yup. Now Yup dot something loaded Yup dot object. Now what we need to do is we in our case we need to validate the name property. So I'll do name colon yup dot toString yup dot string dot required, and I can provide custom message. Yup will provide the message itself, but I want to provide the custom message. So provide dot max. You can explore the YUP library. You will have multiple functions and validation, so you can use them. You can also apply custom validation. So name field, name field should be less than. Okay, I missed one thing. The first parameter should be length of length less than 15 characters. And what I'll do is I'll add the validation for name, age as well. For age, because age is a number property, so we have number. And what we need to do is, what I need to do is, the age should be greater than 10 and less than 60 maybe. So we can do it ourselves. So next 60 comma less than 60 dot min. So age should be less than greater than 10. So now the implementation is quite simple for the validation. What we have did is we need to apply the validation on name property. Name property should be string. It should be required. So if user will not provide any value, so it will handle on the client side and will show you the error. If the character in the name field are greater than 15, it will show you error. In case of age, it should be number, and age should not be greater than 60 and less than 10. So that's how we implement the over here, and we don't need to do anything else. I have not provided the error field for the age, so let me copy this as well here, and instead of name, I'll provide age. Formik.error is a property we will receive. In our previous case, where we have implemented the errors separately by manually. So we have created the errors object and we have written this error object. So it's an object. You can name it ABC. So this object is available in Formik.errors, and whatever we have the value, so we provided the name property. Similarly, we are not implementing it manually. We are not providing the name property manually, but we are providing the name property on validation. So what we will have is same Formik.errors.name. So there is no difference, but validation will become quite easy. I hope it is being done with the, okay, no, it's not done with the yup, because I'm using the old form. Okay, use Formik is not different. Okay, so we have form now. I'll not be adding any values and will directly click the submit button. Name field is required. Age should be greater than 10. So let me, so as I type, error disappears, but age errors stays. Submit, it will stay the same. So what I'll do is I'll provide the 86. Error updated, it should be less than 60. 25. Now it's okay, and it will not give you any error. I'll press the submit button and it will show you. So that's how you can ease your implementation with the validation. So the implementation of Formik is quite easy, and you can do this with the Formik hook, so that it will available with the initial value, submit, validation schema, and form, submit. All these things need to be. One thing what we can do is, because we need to do implement these two property, always we need to implement these two properties, so we can reduce the headache by. So I have these properties on name field. I'm just removing it from the age field, and what I'll do is spread operator, Formik dot get props, get field props, and I'll need to provide the name of the field. So it will do the same what we are doing over here. So at this moment we are using only two properties, so it will do the same thing for us, and we don't need to implement these two properties again and again. If we have a 10, 20 or 30 fields form, it's quite helpful. But still there are a lot of code even in the form which we can reduce, and we'll do it that uh, in next step. Now what we need to do is uh, Formik provide us a context API, in which what we can do is we can reduce this code as well to simplify this code. So let me go to the documentation. This tutorial link is quite handy, and you can refer this all the time. Leveraging React context. Okay, and so you can see, instead of calling use Formik for hook, you're creating a Formik tag. All these information will be stay same, just in a property of an input field or a tag, and then we'll provide as I have shown you in context API. There are two things: a consumer and a provider. Provider is being provided at the top level, and in the consumer we have two implementation. Either we use consumer in this style or a different style. So Formik has provided this style, so you need to implement this function. I'll show you in a moment. So let's move to the this one. What we can do is, let me again copy user from okay. Now we have the Formik tag. So instead of using this one, what I'll do is I'll call the Formik tag. In this tag, we need to provide 2 or 3 properties. At this moment, we need 3, because we have initial value, we have submit button, and we have validation. So initial value, and as we have discussed at the start of React, that whatever JavaScript you need to use anywhere, you need to provide curly brackets. So we need to provide object to initial value. So first we need to provide this curly bracket, and then we need to provide this object over here. So and we need on submit curly bracket again, and this function inside the curly bracket. Then we need schema validation. Again, okay, so now we are done. Formik should be wrapped around our full form should be wrapped around Formik. And then what we'll do is we'll remove this use Formik because we don't need it. And one important thing, Formik is a tag. Inside that tag we need, let me remove this so that I can show you. Okay, so we have created the tag Formik, and because it's a context API, we need its consumer. So what we can do is we will call curly bracket. In this curly bracket, we'll provide the consumer. So Formik, we are creating a function over here. Inside that function, we will display our full form, the form which we have used. So we'll add our full form over here. Simple. So as we have seen, this use Formik returns an object. In that object, we use handle submit is available in Formik, values is available in Formik, error is available in Formik. Same goes here. This Formik will come from the context API, and we can Formik.handle submit format. There will be no change at this moment. I'll change the input fields, but it will stays the same. Everything will stay the same. Just we have converted it to the context API of Formik. Okay, so add assignment line 36. Okay. Basically, this Formik function it requires return. So either you create a return, or because there are multiple line of code, so what you can do is you can provide round bracket. So whenever you provide a round bracket around a code, it work as a return value. That's a React thing. Okay, so we have this similar. There's no difference. We have converted our form into the Formik context API. So why? What's the benefit of it? What we'll do is we'll remove this input field, and Formik provide an input fields with the name of field, and Formik also provide error messages. So it will help us reduce all these uh, this lengthy code. And what we'll do is, okay, one, we need to use form of Formik as well. So Formik provide form, field, error message, all these tags provided by the Formik. So capital form, capital F. Yes, it's important. And now what we'll do is, here after the label field, this field is provided by the Formik, and in the field what we need to provide is, first thing is type. I'll say I need a text box, and another thing is name. Name should be name. So property, name property, and it should be name. I can also provide ID property, and it should be name. So we can handle that. Now we do not need to provide on change on value because Formik will handle it itself. So it's removed. Another important thing, error message. Error message. And name equals to document. As you can see, we have reduced the code. Same goes for the age field. I'll copy from here. Now you can see we have reduced the code quite much. If we have 10, 20 or 30 fields, that code will be too much for us, and that's quite easy to implement over here. And all these fields we provide all these properties that goes directly to the DOM of particular element. So it will create a text box, and all these properties will appear on the text box as an attribute. Okay, so field is not being imported. Okay, name field is required. Ad should be generated. So now the difference is we have done all the errors and everything will work as we have done previously. But as you can see, this error is appeared black because I have not provided the color over it. And the problem is it is being provided by the Formik directly. So you can customize it if you want. You can customize the error message if you want. Let's say I have a function render which is provided by the Formik, by the way. And it gives me message, whatever information needs to be printed, and I can create div over here. Instead of div, I will use a string. And expected assignment, again it requires return. Okay, so you have name field is required. So you can handle these element as well with the Formik. So what we have seen up till now, that if we are implementing form manually, it will require quite a lot of code, error management, updating, everything will be required too much of a code. Formik helps us to reduce this code and provide quite good validation. So we can use that things together and we can implement this way. So Formik will help us in reducing our code, managing forms in a much better style, and we can do lot more things. You can go through with this article, and it will give you the too many facilities to handle your validation, your submission, and all these things. As you can see, submitting, if it will provide if your data is being submitted on the server, so you can disable the button and all these things. There can be a lot other things which you can do with the customization and as well. So that's mainly the Formik. Sir, I need to show with the material UI how you can use input field with material UI. Should I do that, or we have, as I have covered this Formik here?
Daniyal, what should we do?
Yes, sir. I think multi-step will take some time. So in next class, I will do multi-step, and Sir Zeeshan can show the material UI today.
Yeah, and definitely multiple step also requires material UI. So if a student gets the hang of material UI.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes, we got you.
Okay, so for material UI, let me show you the first material UI. I have already installed material UI. In case of material UI, what we need to do is we need components. So in case of text box, we need to implement like this. So at this moment, if we are using the Formik with the standard field of Formik, so how we can implement this text field? Because for material UI we need that text field, because this text field has all the UI or all the implementation of material UI. So for that, what we need to do is we need, let me user form. Now our code remains the same. What we'll do is user form with material UI, and in this what I'll do is material UI. The good thing about the field of Formik is it has the capability to handle other component as well. So once we install the material UI, I have created the same. There is no difference. The Formik, submit, validation, all are same. What I need to do is I need to show. It's not defined. I need to show it the UI of material UI. The text field should be in a style of material UI. So for that, we need to use elements of material UI, text fields or components provided by the material UI, like this. So let me go and copy how should import text field, and then I can create text filter. So in that case, if I need to create a text field, so I need to provide the label and the variant as well. At this moment, label, just need to show you the variant is outlined. So there is the material UI text box, but it's not inside our Formik. It's a separate. So what we need to do, what we can do is in the field, instead of providing type, what I can do is as it has a property as, and in that as I'll provide text field as a component inside it. So field tag or the component of field will accept text field, and whatever property we will provide over here, these properties, these attributes will be part of text fields attributes. So we need to provide this variant. So how we are going to provide this variant over here? So we don't need to worry about. We just provide it on the field property variant equals outline. I'll remove it from here, and then
You did not provide label.
oh, I also need to provide the label, and I can skip this label as well. So for the text field, label also will appear here, and the quality of Formik field is it will pick all these properties and provide on the element which is being created into the DOM. So I'll say name, just providing 2 columns to differentiate so that student can see the difference. Text field, label, age, and variant. Here I'll provide the standard variant, so I can go to the standard or a field, whatever we need to use it. So let me use the field. Now you can see we have 2 properties, name, age, and as we're updating the property, it appears name field is required. So same validation is being applied. It will be part of the format. Whatever we'll be using, the information we'll be providing will be part of the format, and it will work as we are using the format. But now we have an input or component of material UI. So material UI is being used inside the format, and we can create our form beautifully with material UI, and validation can be applied with the Formik. I guess we have covered in much detail, and it's with.
In the next class, Zeeshan, Daniyal will show a multi-form page, and Adil will basically show a project. So therefore, bye-bye everyone, and see you guys next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much in the next class. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.